Hello.
Hello.
I'm hoping we're live, and I'm hoping that I've managed to record it, as last week I wasn't so great on the technical side. I thought I would have learned by now. But anyway, hello everybody. It's really nice to be back again, and obviously with Sophie again, which is just great. So for people who don't know, Sophie is a clinical consultant nutritionalist, and is very much associated with the British Dietetic Association. Plus she has her own clinic, City Dietitians. And Sophie is very kindly managing our forum that we have, that anyone can post any questions that they have on nutrition at the moment. So welcome again, Sophie. It's nice to see you. I think it was only 2 weeks ago we had our last chat, wasn't it?
Doesn't feel like that long ago, but it's lovely to be back. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So interesting enough, what we decided, or what Sophie actually suggested, she was very keen to come back for us to have a real chat about Christmas and how we feel about food, and all the things that are going around with food and nutrition at this period, because I think it's far more heightened. And then lo and behold, the Times went and dropped the most awful article ever the other week, and it is actually, we have actually replied, I suppose, in a way, to the Times in one of our articles. I don't know if anybody saw it, but I know, Sophie, that you also posted some stuff, and I think they had 27 tips to help you through the Christmas period.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to elaborate a bit on that.
Sure. So the article was around trying to prevent weight gain at Christmas. And there were 27 tips on how not to gain weight at Christmas, with ridiculous ideas like weighing yourself every day, which is real eating disorders behavior, drinking a pint of water before your meal so that you're too full to eat, again, something that people with eating disorders often do. Things like having half a mince pie instead of a whole one, these sorts of things that really reinforce disordered eating and eating disorders and serve nobody. They just really encourage people to feel very anxious over Christmas and to worry about their weight over Christmas during this one time of year where we, enjoy these festive foods and should be trying to relax, especially this year. We all really need that. These sorts of articles are hugely irresponsible and really do cause only harm and no good at all. So I was hoping we had changed the narrative a little bit around this, but unfortunately it would seem that even a big publication like the Times is still getting caught up in this terrible diet culture world.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting reading some of the comments back from people, which was absolutely anti. And I do sort of wonder whether the Times just, it's this time of the year, we've always got to put out that article, how to not put on weight over Christmas, without actually really thinking and having their fingers on the pulse as to where we are now. So I think that perhaps we've moved on, but it's the publications and the people there who dictate what's going on really aren't keeping up with everyone else, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly an issue. And I think there is a big issue with this time of year. And I get asked to write articles. Will you contribute to this article on how to, tips to avoid weight gain at Christmas, that sort of thing? And I've obviously always said no, because it's really fundamentally against what I believe we should be thinking about at Christmas time and how we should be thinking about food. And I think it's really important that we say right at the beginning of this chat that if people are feeling anxious about gaining weight at Christmas, or feeling anxious and worried about all the Christmas food that's going to be around, that's not a healthy space to be in. That's not something that you should be normalizing, or that we should normalize as a society. And unfortunately, articles like this really normalize that anxiety around eating, that it isn't a normal thoughts and feelings about food. And, we're going to get really into talking about our relationship with food and how we can improve our relationship with food. But these articles do get written and have been written historically, but we really do need to change the narrative. And the public don't want to hear this anymore, that they're done with it. And I think that was reflected in the comments on this article. But it's shocking to me that a publication like the Times, and the journalist is a very experienced health writer, would write something like this. I think it says a lot about her relationship with food. I think it's a real shame that this is still being touted as something we should be discussing at Christmas time.
Yeah, and also then they sneaked in, just for good measure, exercise as well.
Yeah.
And it wasn't taken bicarb or sober. It was something something that you had to take before exercise because then you wouldn't feel so hungry. So as you say, I think it was totally wrapped up in all negativity, everything to make anybody feel completely and utterly rubbish about themselves, you know. And that was, I think that article dropped a week and a half ago. So a real good lead up to Christmas for us to be feeling guilty when we're out buying food, when really what we all know, especially at the moment, the mental health side of everything is so important. And one of the best ways we all know of socialising, you know, when we can socialise, even if it be with restricted numbers this year, is sitting around a table. We know for nutrition purposes that sitting around the table is the best way to eat your food as opposed to be going on the go. And then, as I said, the mental health side of it. So forgetting all that, the stuff, the negativity and the stuff that they actually said, what are the things and I don't want to say we should be doing, because I don't feel that we should ever be saying we should be doing this and we should be doing that, but what would you suggest is a good way to look at these issues?
So I think, first of all, again, we need to remember that we need to not normalise these disordered activities and things and thoughts and feelings around food. And I think with social media and Instagram in particular, a lot of really disordered eating behaviours have been normalised and made to seem like they are things we should all be aspiring to, which is very much what this article has done. So if you feel yourself aspiring to following some of these kinds of tips around Christmas time, or aspiring to, I don't know, do all the meal prep and all of these kind of things that you see on Instagram, just try and take a little bit of a step back and think about what really matters. And I think particularly at this time of year, we just need to focus on what actually matters. And the truth is, if you gain a few pounds over Christmas, no one's going to love you any less. You're not going to be any less good at your job. You're not going to be a worse mum or parent or aunt or whatever you are. None of those things are going to be affected. And so if none of those things that are really important will change at all if you gain a couple of pounds, why does it matter? Why does it matter to you? And try and dig down on why. And that why question, why do you put so much weight on your weight? Why does it matter? If you can get to the bottom of that, it usually comes down to a self-esteem issue. It usually comes down to a point where you think, well, my weight is a very important thing about me and people will judge me, or people will think this and people will think that. And if you can then unpack that a little bit, you can say, well, would I even notice if you, Katrina, gained 2 pounds? Would you notice if I gained 2 pounds? No. Would it matter? Would I think?
I could say, and would I care if you gained 2 pounds? No, the nicest possible way.
No, of course, yeah, absolutely. And I think we somehow, as women, particularly women, through our lives, have it reinforced that our appearance is something that is so, so important about us, that if we gained a couple of pounds, people would care less about us, we would be less important, we'd be less valuable, we would be less, I don't know, cared for. And of course, none of those things are really true. One of the things that I think we lose sight of, particularly around this time of year, is that if we were able to look after our bodies in a healthful way the rest of the year round, birthdays and Easter and whatever else aside, the few days over Christmas where we eat all this lovely like celebration food really wouldn't matter. But what this kind of article reinforces is that we should be all doing this binge purge, or like this overeating and then starving ourselves, and this yo-yo dieting all through the year. And it comes to Christmas and we should still be just as anxious about Christmas time. And you know, in reality, if we had better relationships with food and our bodies, we did good self-care, we had good coping strategies for stress, we wouldn't need to be worrying about this time of year, and we could really enjoy it for what it is. You know, Christmas is founded as a winter feast. It was started off because we needed to have this feast to get us through to the winter. And this year, more than ever, we all desperately need this time of celebration, this time to come together in our bubbles with those families that we can be with, and eat in a way that brings us joy and makes us feel better. Because, you know, if the lockdowns continue through January and February, it's going to be a dark time for a lot of people. And an article like this that reinforces the idea that you're not allowed to enjoy Christmas, you're not allowed to let loose, you're not allowed to relax your rules around food, and in fact you've got to put loads more rules in, 27 rules in about food, it infuriates me, and it will have done a huge amount of harm to those people who are already struggling and suffering with disordered eating thoughts and behaviours.
Absolutely. And on top of the fact they've just got over a second lockdown, and there's been so much about lockdown weight. And as somebody wrote, does it really matter, as you're saying, does it really matter if we put on half a stone or even a stone? It's not so much about the weight always, is it? It's not the weight, it's actually, us understanding. So we know that we can, if we can lose that weight to go back to a healthy, it's more about the habit of eating and what we're eating, which really is the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that, we've all recognised during lockdowns in particular that our energy expenditure, we're not walking anywhere anymore, we're not doing very much. My commute is from that side of my living room to this side of my living room. There's no activity in my day unless it's purposeful and I go out and I find it. And that's the same for everybody across the country. So it's inevitable that lots of people will have put on some weight. And again, as you say, we've survived a global pandemic. We've got through this, we've got through that. We've overcome all of these huge life hurdles over the last 12 months. And ultimately, if you've done that, then great. And if you've done that and you put on a bit of weight, it's not the end of the world. And once you get back to your normal routines and when life gets back to normal, the chances are it will come off quite comfortably. It's the same with Christmas in that it won't come off comfortably if in January you try to go on a crash diet, or as people have been doing throughout lockdown, try a crash diet, cut out everything from their diet. And then within a couple of weeks, of course, they can't sustain that. And then they fall off the wagon, can't eat, they feel like a failure, get back into that shame cycle, feeling crap about themselves because they've overeaten or can't follow their diet, and then gain more weight and get back into a negative cycle. And that relationship with food is far too common and it's really harmful. And again, this kind of press coverage of these sorts of issues really reinforces that behaviour. It's really bad news.
And have you found, coming into your clinic and as your general advisory role, that people naturally they start worrying about Christmas and food? Do you find that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of this week, last week, even actually all through December, it's fair to say that speaking to all of my patients who have challenges with their relationship with food about how they're feeling about Christmas. And interestingly, I work with men and women who struggle with their relationship with food and their body image. Interestingly, men generally say, oh, I don't care, like, it's just another day, like, it's not going to make much difference. Whereas women often say, yeah, I'm really worried about it. I'm going to stay with my mum. She's going to try and feed me. I'm going to do this and it's going to be really difficult and I can't stick to things. And we really have to unpack that and think, actually, you just need to enjoy yourself and be able to relax around food. And if you can't, we need to do the work around how you can do, because these kinds of thoughts and feelings around celebratory times, they don't just steal your Christmas joy, they steal your holidays when you're going on your summer holiday. They ruin Easter for you. I've had work with patients who are terrified about their own honeymoon because they're worried they're going to overeat. That's the thing. They're kind of looking forward to getting married, but they're terrified about going on honeymoon because they're going to put on some weight. It steals, these kinds of narratives steal women's and men's joy throughout their life, and it shouldn't be allowed. And it is something that I'm working hard to unpack. We're having these kinds of conversations, which is so important. And obviously in a clinical capacity, also I'm working hard with my patients week in, week out to try and help them to feel better about these things.
And you raised a really good point about weddings, because the trouble is, it seems to me that a lot of people really, really crash diet for their wedding to get into that dress. And the dress size they're in is not their natural body weight. And that's the other thing, is people don't seem prepared to accept that they are naturally, some people are naturally thin, whatever they eat. And some people are slim, and then some people are that much bigger. And none of it really matters as long as you're eating healthily, isn't it? And so I can see the stress of the honeymoon of, oh my God, I now can eat because I don't have to control, what I'm meant to be doing. So I can see that's a really, it's not great to have that stress straight away on your married life to start going forward.
And you know what else is a shame when women do that crash dieting before their wedding is that very often whenever they look back at their wedding pictures, they go, oh, I wish I was that thin again. They don't think that was such a lovely day and I felt I looked so happy. They often think it makes them feel crap about themselves the rest of their life because they can't get back into the wedding dress, or they can't feel that they're that slim ever again. And that's something that I think is a real shame. I think it spoils those memories for people.
And then that sort of then goes into the cycle, because we're talking about an image, and then the images that you get through social media on your Instagram of all of these things. And even then, those images aren't real because people have just shaved off a bit here and there. So, that, and people forget they probably tampered with their photos and just saying, well, actually, you never were like that to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some really great data and research around the impact of these image editing apps on the women who actually edit their own pictures. So again, this is a phenomenon that happens amongst men as well, but I'm so used to talking about it from a female-centric perspective. So excuse me when I slip into that narrative. The women who edit their own pictures, when they look at those pictures, they then feel terrible about themselves because they don't even look like their own pictures. So when they look in the mirror, they experience much worse body dissatisfaction because they don't look like their own edited pictures. And so it's self-harm, you know, it's harmful to yourself as well as everyone else who looks at your images and wishes they looked like you do.
So how do you stop yourself? So we can all understand this, you know, it's not as if that we're not, any of us are, or all of us rather, intelligent to understand all of this, but how do we stop ourselves going into that cycle? Or if we're in that cycle of thinking, what are the, you know, do you have some tips that you can say, right, this is what you need to sort of, I don't know if it's like a mantra, but you know, that thing, this is a sort of safe things you can say to yourself to get you back, you know, having a more balanced view.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I would say that if you are in a space where this is really distressing for you, or this conversation even feels quite triggering for you and you're really struggling, then please get some help, either from a dietitian who, like myself, who works on these kinds of things, or from a counsellor or psychologist, someone who can help you to deal with your mental health, because it's really a mental health thing, it's not a nutrition thing. And it's something that I've done a lot of additional work in beyond my dietetic education. So the first thing to say is get help if you're really struggling. If it's just niggling and it's bothering you a little bit, the first thing to do is ask yourself the why question. And this is what I do with my patients when I'm in clinic with them. I say, why does it matter if you gain some weight over Christmas? What does that mean about you? What does that mean about you? What will people think about that? What's your, because once we challenge that first thought, people go, well, actually, it doesn't actually mean anything. Okay, so what's the worry then? Well, I'm worried that, you know, I won't feel as comfortable, or I won't be this, or I won't be that. Well, what does that really mean? How's that affect you? What's that going to look like? And why is that so important to you? And once you can sort of unpack and get to the irrationality of some of these thoughts that we're taught to think, and they are thoughts that we're taught to think about ourselves and our bodies, once we can get to the irrationality of that, we can really start challenging it. And the next thing to think about is, if you are someone who uses social media, as good social media hygiene, get rid of any accounts that reinforce any of this disordered behavior, or who you notice are sharing bodies that are unattainable to you. So do you really need to see lots of pictures of other women's bodies on Instagram? Is that helpful to you, or does it actually make you just compare yourself to them and feel worse about yourself? And I suspect that the vast majority of women who look at other women's bodies on social media, and it's the same for men, if you're looking at Fitspo or, you know, fitness inspiration accounts, or even some celebrities who commonly have their very toned bodies out on Instagram, is that helping you, or is that making you feel worse? So some of that stuff is really, really important. Once you've worked through some of those thoughts and feelings, you can also reflect on your relationship with food growing up and what you were taught about your body and eating when you were growing up. Lots of my patients, if I use an example of one of my patients, she is saying that when she was a very small child, her mum told her she wasn't allowed to go to ballet because she doesn't have the right body shape for it. And it was from that very early stage that she started feeling like, my body isn't good enough. And inevitably through the years, that has led her into a situation where her relationship with food is very damaged and unhappy, and it doesn't put her in, it doesn't stand her in good stead. So one of the exercises you can do there is think about, well, what did you need to hear when you were younger and you were a child? What did you need to hear about your body that would have helped you? And you can write some of those things down. It's sort of reflecting on your childhood and what you actually needed. And if you can find, lots of people can't, but if you can pinpoint the sort of moment in time where you first started noticing that you didn't like your body, or that you felt you weren't good enough, or that you were eating the wrong things, you can do some nice healing around that through reflective work and thinking, what did I need to hear around that time about my body? Usually kids need to hear, your body's going to change, keep eating your vegetables and you'll be fine. Like really general, good, broad advice, nothing to worry about kind of messaging. And if you're not sure what you needed to hear, it's probably because you're still really caught up in that really traumatic moment where you were told you're not good enough. And if you are, then talk that through, work with a mental health professional, come and work with us. We can help you unpack those sorts of things. The other thing that we often, well, one of the things let me go back a step. There are three things when we're growing up that we need to be taught that can serve us well for our relationship with food for the future. And there's plenty of other ones, but the ones that I usually work on with the people I'm working with is obviously nutrition knowledge. What does your body need? What does a healthy diet look like? How can you eat well day to day? And again, lots of my patients who really struggle with their relationship with food may have had parents who both worked full-time jobs, and so they had lots of takeaways, or they would come home with food. There wasn't really good food relationship with food modeling in the house, not necessarily a lot of cooking education or nutrition education at home. Unfortunately, we don't teach that in schools, so it really has to come from home. And when it doesn't, we notice that having an impact on people's lives forever, unless we break the cycle. So nutrition knowledge from healthcare professionals, not from Instagram and not from celebrities and influencers. Nutrition knowledge is really helpful. Self-care is so important, and what you have modeled in terms of self-care in the household will really help you to take that forward through your life. And if you're taught that, you know, self-care is done through eating, or self-care is done through starving yourself, or self-care is done through lying on the sofa as opposed to maybe doing some exercise that serves you, or you're taught that only vigorous exercise that is exhausting is self-care, that's where we can get really stuck. So we need to teach ourselves really good self-care techniques, and some of those will be exercise-based. Exercise is a really important form of self-care. That doesn't mean that you are hurting yourself every day on the treadmill or getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and losing out on sleep. It means finding ways of moving your body that serve you on that day and in that moment. You're having a really long day, then thinking I'm going to go to a spinning class at the end of the day. It's not the right thing. Have a long day and go to a yoga class if that's what you want to do. Feel better. Listen to your body and try and understand what you need rather than taking external cues. And some days self-care will be lying on the sofa and watching Netflix, and that is fine and that's great, and you need to listen to your body. The other thing that we don't often have modelled at home is good coping strategies. And very often the coping strategies for stress that are taught at home are food related. So if you've had a difficult day, let's have something to eat. If you've had, I don't know, a really stressful meeting, we're going to eat. If we're bored in the evenings, we're going to eat. What are we going to do? We're going to eat. And so the other thing that we can help ourselves with is really good coping strategies for stress. And of course, under stressful and difficult situations, which so many of us have experienced recently, and so many of us experience more over Christmas, because coming together with families isn't always easy, and we're out of our routines, which can feel stressful. We need to find ways of finding stillness that aren't food related necessarily. And that could be things like doing some guided meditation can work really well. Going out for a walk might be something that really helps to reduce your stress. But so often we're just not taught good stress management strategies at home. And that, again, has a big impact through the rest of our lives. And lots of my patients will use food as their primary coping strategy, their primary stress management strategy, their primary self-care strategy. And actually, we can unpack some of that stuff. But what happens in these sorts of situations is that people often also believe that starving themselves and not overeating and excessive exercise is a good self-care or coping strategy, and of course it's not. It leads us into further damage.
What strikes me from what you're saying is all of the two things really. One of them is very much how on earth do people know how to look after themselves in lots of ways? Because because I'm from an old age, we had home economics lessons, so we were taught how to cook and how to do basic things. And also I came from an age where you had 3 solid meals a day and that was it. And you might have had a few sweets and you ate at specific times. So if that is all gone, then you just get food chucked at you. How on earth would you know to do that? So I can understand why it's important. And certainly there is absolutely no shame, because it sounds ridiculous. Well, we all eat, so we should all know how to eat properly. That's so not true. And that we should come to people like yourselves, qualified nutritionists and dietitians, who can understand and help you understand what is good for your body and what your body type is like. Because, we've already said that everybody is different. Everybody and everybody, if that makes sense, is kind of different. And I think the other thing is, the problem is that when we use it as a coping, and you didn't mention it, but I think it's also a reward system. Food is used, every excuse we use food, but when we're eating, a lot of the time we're actually doing something else. So we're not being, as you said, we're not mindful when we're doing anything. So we're just shoving stuff into our bodies, which are empty calories most of the time, or they might give us a hit for, a few minutes of being really alive and jolly. And then, we haven't talked about the slumps of it all. So I do think it's so important for people to take advice from people like yourselves.
I mean, absolutely. Obviously, I believe that, and I'm massively biased. But the issue is that often, particularly young people now, I think the statistic is that 80% of young people take their nutrition advice from Instagram, but 90% of the nutrition advice on Instagram is incorrect. And they're looking to celebrities and influencers and people with no nutrition education, and also people who are selling things and are taking money to sell things to young people in order to get that advice. And I think one of the things that's really important to remember is the shame cycle that occurs when people are trapped in this kind of negative relationship with food. And it's what this article is really reinforcing, is that if you do eat a whole mince pie, you're a terrible person and you've undone everything and you've ruined your diet for the whole 12 months and you might as well give up. That's the stuff that was really poisonous to people who are using food as their main coping strategy, as their main reward system, as everything else. And I think that's where some of this stuff, this diet culture stuff, is really pervasive and really causes a lot of harm, is that when we do have these foods that we're told we shouldn't be having, we end up feeling terrible about ourselves. We feel like a failure and we think we just want to give up. And we feel it really undermines our self-esteem and our, how we feel about ourselves. One of my patients gave me a delightful quote the other day, and she said, she'd written down actually some things to talk to me about. She said, well, I don't feel guilty or ashamed when I eat anymore. So that's really nice, but I think it's really dangerous. And we were talking about why do you think that's dangerous? And what's dangerous about not feeling guilty or ashamed about eating anymore? And she said, well, I just think I'm going to just overeat and eat everything. And the question I had for her was, well, do you think, did the guilt and shame actually help you to regulate your food intake before? Well, no, that's why I'm here. Oh, yes, so we need to try another way. Let's work on a different way of helping you to regulate your appetite and why you're eating and what you're doing, as opposed to feeling guilty and ashamed about it, which isn't serving you and doesn't work, regardless of what this kind of article might lead us to believe.
I think, and also we don't allow people to have confidence in themselves. No. In that, actually, I'm sure the lady, the client that you were speaking to, if you had been with her for a bit longer and started talking to her even further, she would suddenly realise that actually she does understand and she does have the strength within. And I suppose that's what you do, is you bring out the strength within people to have the confidence that actually they can manage, they can do this themselves. And, it doesn't matter if you just eat too many biscuits one day, because the next day you will actually, your body, if you start listening to it, will start self-regulating. But I suppose we've just gone so out of kilter with everything. So
yeah, and this is exactly it. One of the things that I work heavily with people on is trusting themselves. Trust yourself to make those food decisions. Trust yourself to know. If you have lots of tools, this is another sort of separate example, it's a good example. If you have lots of tools in your toolkit for stress management, for example, as opposed to just eating, your brain will go, which one of those tools do I need right now? And it might land on food sometimes, but a lot of the time it's going to land on going for a walk, meditation, calling a friend, because you know that you're just going to look for a different thing. But if you constantly just go stress, food, that's what you'll look to. So we have to try and teach people good alternatives to food as their primary coping mechanism, for example. But once you have, you can trust your body to make a different decision. Your brain will reach for the thing that works best for you. And chances are it won't always be food, and that will be better. But we have taught people that they can't trust their own bodies. They can't trust their appetite, they'll overeat. They can't trust their food choices, they'll always choose donuts. It's not true. It's not true about people. We've also taught people that unless they've got a really strict exercise plan and meal plan, that they'll eat everything and they'll be completely out of control. And of course, that's just diet culture. That's people trying to sell people things in order to make them believe that. And this article really perpetuates those thoughts and feelings. It really enforces that you can't trust yourself. You need to be weighing yourself every day just in case. You can't trust yourself. You need to have this bicarbonate thing to suppress your appetite or whatever it might be. You need to drink a pint of water to suppress your appetite. You can't trust your appetite. That stuff is poison, and it reinforces all of these things that I work so hard to try and unpack with people. And it's honestly, the amount of joy that is stolen from people by this kind of narrative is, it should be criminal. It's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. That was the word I was going to say. It is absolutely criminal. And we should be giving people, I mean, that's what Talk Health is all about, is trying to empower people and empower them through giving them the knowledge and the education to make their own choice. You know, they've got everything available. So very quickly, we've got some questions. And I'm sorry, I should have said to everybody who's listening in is please put your questions in. And I'm just going to read a few that we have. Surely a little bit of what you fancy is okay. It's Christmas, all in moderation, surely. Well,
yeah,
I think
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. A lot of the foods we have at this time of year, I think I said it at the beginning, we only really have at this time of year. So feeling guilty about eating them, not you won't necessarily just eat them once a year, but you're only eating them, say, for a month in total. Feeling guilty about that is just nonsense. You know, it's such a waste of your energy.
But it's a wasted emotion, isn't it? And in fact, the same person goes on to say, I've eaten lots of mince pies already. I do lots of exercise, so I think it's okay. It's a lovely treat. I will not feel guilty either. And that's exactly the attitude that you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating that people should just give up on trying to be healthy. That's not what I'm advocating at all. What I'm advocating is that you don't feel guilty and ashamed, because that makes the situation worse. One of the things that lots of people find helpful over Christmas is just to have some things that they try and still make sure they do most days. Eating 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. You probably nail that on Christmas Day. Even if you eat loads of other stuff as well, you probably still have 5 portions of fruit and veg, and you should feel really good about that. Like, you should feel really positive about it.
Yeah, because those nutrients, can't say the word. I mean, they're in your body. Once you've eaten it, they're there, aren't they? So you're good. This is another one which is really interesting. What if the patient feels losing weight is more about their health rather than self-esteem, and they don't want to put on any more?
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's completely fine. And I'm really pro people being able to choose what body weight they are within the healthy parameters of what would be healthy for them. And weight loss, when you are going to benefit from it from a health perspective, is something that's absolutely important. And again, I'm not saying that people should never try and lose weight and that it's impossible or any of those things, which does go on in these kinds of conversations. Losing weight is something, if you are overweight, is something that we should be supporting people to aim for. But feeling guilty and ashamed and worried about our food is not going to help with weight loss. We know that that leads to the binge, sort of the yo-yo dieting cycle, where you're good for a while and you lose the weight, but before you know it, you've fallen off that wagon because it's unsustainable and you put on even more weight. So we have to break those cycles and work towards healthy and sustainable changes that don't feel like massive restriction.
It is really, isn't it? And I'm sure it would help if we could get rid of the word weight in all of this and just talk about how to eat healthily for your body, what you need, what fuel do you need to put in your body. And if we do it like that, then the weight, the excess weight will fall off, I suppose, basically, won't it? Your body will start doing what it's meant to be doing, and your gut health will improve, your mental health will improve, your skin will improve, and all of those big benefits that come.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that my patients often say, or I don't think that they normally tell me that they don't believe me that the small changes I've recommended that they make will work, but they often come back to the second appointment and say, I can't believe that I've lost weight because I didn't feel like I was doing enough to try and lose weight, and I'm still enjoying my food and blah, blah, blah. And the belief is that you have to be starving yourself and you have to be on some special rigid diet in order to lose weight. And the truth is, some small changes will help you. So small sustainable changes will support that weight loss. And it doesn't have to be some strange diet or food you've never eaten before or anything. You know, you can still eat from wherever you have to get your lunch from every day in order for your life to be comfortable and lose weight. It's just that we are taught to believe, like this article tells people, that you have to be horribly restrictive and really strict and careful with everything in order to lose weight. And it's just not true.
Well, we're drawing to an end now, and I kind of realised we called it a Christmas special, but we didn't put much in there. And I was just thinking, I wonder if people were expecting us to come up with some amazing food recipes or talk about food. But interesting enough, we haven't really talked about food. We actually haven't spoken at all about what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating. We've been talking about is everything around it and the emotional relationship we all have with food, and that's the essence of it. It's not actually what we eat.
No,
I mean, it does
it's
boil
not
down
what
to,
you eat. It's not what you eat. It's why you're eating that
yeah.
we need to unpack for sure. I did yesterday, and I've created a recipe for a Brussels sprout salad, which is like coleslaw and delicious with leftovers on Boxing Day. So if you want that one, I'll share it with you. But yeah, not particularly interested in telling you not to eat turkey or to eat more turkey, because it's not going to help you really. Enjoy Christmas and enjoy your food and enjoy the celebration.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much for joining us once again. And as I said, don't forget, we do have a forum, or I think we've called it a forum or a clinic, where you can ask Sophie directly any questions you have on nutrition. Although I think we talk more about emotional health far more than we do actual food itself, which is really is very interesting in itself. But I think sort out the emotional side, and then the food naturally, that goes straight on without even noticing or thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So, thank you so much for your time, Sophie, and
thanks for having me.
a lovely Christmas, and I hope you eat loads of turkey, loads of mince pies, loads of Brussels sprouts, all those things.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.